All right, and welcome to another awesome episode of Detections. I'm your host, BSD Bandit, along with
Understudy 77.
And Exile Atreides.
So what is going on tonight? This is a first, actually. We have
Yes.
all of our hosts and a guest.
Well, I think it's because we are all that excited about our guest tonight.
Ooh, that's very true. Very true. So, I mean, without further ado, Exile, take it away. You want to bring our guest in?
We'll bring our guest in, and I'm just gonna say this: it still is setting on me that our guest came to us rather than us having to go begging to other people, being like, "Please be on our show." But tonight
we are very thankful.
Yeah, we're super thankful. We have Tanya Janka, or She-Hex Purple.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Which is absolutely the best color ever, by the way.
I agree.
And my background is purple in honor of that. So
Nice.
All right, well, welcome. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, sir. If some of our listeners aren't familiar, what's going on? What do you do?
So I am a giant nerd on the internet who's obsessed with securing software. So I was a dev for a really long time, and then I met this ethical hacker, and he spent a year and a half convincing me to switch to InfoSec. I was like, no, being a dev's the best ever. And he was like, no, it's even better. And then I discovered that you could be a security person, but then hang out with devs all the time, and that was a paying role, and it's called AppSec. And then you just help them make stuff secure. And I was like, I get paid for this, and it can be a job instead of a job on top of my real job. Yeah. And so, so I now run a training company called We Hack Purple, and we do on-demand training, and we have this online community, and I wrote a book called Alice and Bob Learn Application Security, and it came out late last year, and I'm so ridiculously excited that people are buying it. And I know that everyone's like, of course people would buy it, but you don't know when you do a thing if anyone will like it until after you've done it, right? And so,
yep.
Yeah.
before anybody points fingers at me out of the Kim Zetter thing, I have already ordered the book.
Good job. Yes. You get a
I did it before
point,
the
sir.
end of the show. I did it at the beginning this time.
Progress. It's progress.
Next
that's
time,
what's
maybe
important.
I'll do it before we have the guest on. That would probably be the right way to go.
I'll take
That
what
was
I can get. I actually got approved to make an audiobook out of the book, and I'm so excited, but because of COVID, it's so where do I go and do that? Because I'm afraid to go outside.
If you get Kevin Smith to read for your audiobook, I would
Wow.
pay $500 for that audiobook. I would learn so much because I just love listening to that guy talk.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Seth Godin, this marketing dude, and he could read the phone book to me, and I'd be like, "Oh, Seth, tell me more."
So tell us about the book. That's obviously the big news before we dive into the other stuff. Tell us about the book.
So when I switched from being a dev into being a pen tester and then into AppSec, there was no book that I could read, which I found really annoying. So there are some cool books. So there's The Tangled Web. It's a cool book. There's the Web App Hacker's Handbook. I like that. There's so Laura Bell wrote this cool book about basically Agile and kind of adding security into Agile. And then there's this other person named Julian Vemont. I know I'm saying his name wrong, but he wrote a book about kind of how to weave some security through DevOps. But I'm but I want to be an AppSec pro. How do I do that? And so I found I had to just put together so many weird things and just slowly learn. And then I started doing talks, and people are like, "We really like your talks. You really simplify things." And I'm dyslexic. So in Canada, I'm considered disabled, but I like to think of it as I just learn a different way. And so when I learned French as an adult, I went to a special school for dyslexic people that are adults that want to learn another language. And they taught me in a bunch of different ways to learn the same thing. And then now I actually spell better in French than in English, which is a bit weird, even though I learned when I was 30. And so I feel like if you learn things the right way, like it'll really take it home. So I decided what I wanted to teach, which is like basically from the very beginning of what is security, and then what is like software security, and then how to build secure web apps. And then I get into like all kinds of new tech and like how to secure that. And I just continue on down the rabbit hole, because when you write a book, you get to do that. But I tried to make each thing kind of have multiple ways of explaining the same thing. And I remember one of my technical editors saying, Tanya, you're explaining this for the third time in a different way. You told a story, you put a diagram, and now you're writing out the code. And I'm like, yeah, because not everyone's going to get it from just one of those.
Yep.
And so I use a lot of stories. And so the book is called Alice and Bob Learn Application Security. And so Alice and Bob are these super famous characters that were used to explain what encryption was. And that's actually how I was first introduced to security and SSL when, so like 21 years ago at one of my co-op terms in college. And I was like, oh, Alice and Bob. So I've always used them as examples. So like Alice does this, Bob does that. And so I was going to call it the Application Security Handbook. And I was like, but I'm toying with the idea of Alice and Bob Learn AppSec, because I want to have all these examples and stories. I want Alice and Bob to have jobs. I want them to have health conditions and families and things that they want to keep secret and things they're okay with sharing. And my publisher was like, no one's ever written a book called Alice and Bob Learn blah, 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 blah. He's like, that's a way more fun title. Everything's named Handbook. That's lame.
Yeah, I love the title. I really do. And I love the concept. So like 12 years I've been in InfoSec, primarily in detection and response. I didn't really know anything about application security in any way, shape, or form until I started at a company that just happens to have like the world's biggest bug bounty program. And then I started learning about that stuff really, really quick. But even having people on my team, like in the SOC, that have interest in doing this kind of stuff, there's a lot of bug bounty researchers who are doing how-tos, and those are great. But there's not a lot of really well-developed resources for people who are really interested to dig into this, especially outside like the SANS web application pen testing stuff and a few others. But it's been almost a very unknown segment of the industry as a whole, a little more specialized. But I, for one, am super pumped that like somebody has a book about it. I think it's fantastic.
Yes.
And a seemingly approachable book, right? That's what I love about the title. Like the title makes me feel like I could read it, and my manager brain might understand it.
It definitely can. I've had a lot of non-developers and non-AppSec people like all throughout IT. Like, I'm in help desk and I read your book and I understood almost all of it. I'm like, score.
Excellent.
Like,
there you go.
And I've had some people say like, well, I still don't remember which security header to do. I'm like, get a Post-it note and just like put it in that chapter and then just copy and paste my code in there. That's why I wrote it, for you. I cheat.
Yeah.
Like, I'll be in a meeting and I'll say to someone like, just go to page 42. Yeah, that. Just do that.
Yeah.
I'm like, just copy what I wrote and then put it in the email and then tell the dev that and say you said it. I don't care.
Well, I mean,
But
first in response to that, like, isn't that how we typically just get into being a hacker to begin with? Was we find someone else's work, copy and paste it, and then figure out how to modify it?
Yeah.
But that's true. Like even with like perfect example, 'cause I do web app testing as well, and even with web app testing, if I'm testing an endpoint, like say for open redirects, right?
Yeah.
I have a cheat sheet up because you're not going to remember every little detail. So I have a cheat sheet up. I'm like, okay, cool. And I use an encoder, like whether it's online or something that's built in the Burp Suite. I use these things like, okay, I'm not going to sit there and just try to manually type it out. You have a sheet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is what app hackers do. Like, we don't just remember everything off the top of our head.
Understood. You brought up something which made me think of an interesting point. So, like, it's been my experience in information security, the jobs that have kind of like this whole like mystique about how do you get involved. Usually there's like an unspoken assumption of a background profession first before you move into that. Now
Malware analysis is the one that always comes to mind.
Yeah, and like what has that? I mean,
to people.
Yeah, I was just gonna say for Tanya, like, what has that been? What has been that unspoken assumption for people to make the jump into AppSec?
So if you want to jump into AppSec, you need to understand the basics of coding. You don't need to know, everyone asks me which language to learn. I'm like, it totally does not matter. You just need to understand like what's a loop and what's input and what's output, stuff like that. And then you need to understand the system development lifecycle of where you work. So if they're doing DevOps, you need to understand like how they're doing that. So then you can like jump in the parts where there's space for you and add security. Because if not, you're going to be that person where they're like, oh God, Tanya's coming. Close the door. Pull down the blinds. She's gonna try to make us do like a 3-week code freeze to do a code review. I actually had a director that was like, yeah, we're just gonna stop coding for 6 weeks while we do this code review. And then she left the room, and then my team looks at me. I'm like, we're not gonna stop coding. Who the hell is she? Just
It's
like
really
don't
funny.
just don't check it in.
I was on a panel last night specifically about soft skills and interactions between like other teams and how to get the things that you need by being a good partner and all that stuff, and how important soft skills are to this industry as a whole, not just being technical. So I really love that you kind of talk about that. You're talking about that piece right now too.
Yeah, I don't cover it very much in the book compared to in the We Hack Purple courses. In the book, I tell some stories about, Bob sends an employee that has like a problematic personality on communication training, and how like things go so much better for that employee. And like Bob's life is a lot better as a manager because the employee isn't so inappropriate anymore. But I feel like, well, basically I was only allowed 250 pages, and they're like, you can't say everything in your whole brain. So I was like, I have to pick. But in the course, it's videos and it's on demand. And I'm like, haha, I'll put in as much as I want to.
So speaking of, you read the book, you go, application security is for me.
Yes.
And you've got courses available. Let's talk about that.
Okay. So I basically, I left Microsoft, and I had started a startup company, and we were making a product, and it didn't work out.
You left Microsoft to start your own company?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
They were really supportive and awesome. But then me and my co-founder, like it turned out we both had different ideas, and I was like, okay, so we should break up now rather than after we want to murder each other. We should break up while we still are super respectful and like each other, and like you go off and do this and I'm going to do something else. And I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. And like Microsoft was like, yo, want to come back? And I was like, no, like I can do this. And so people just kept writing me and saying, I'll pay you to train my devs to write secure code. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll show up and do that. And then people were like, could you train our AppSec team? And like, we need to build an AppSec program. Could you help us like improve our program and build it? And so I ended up creating this training, and it's on demand, or like it's live, but virtually because COVID, where I show you everything about application security as we build a program that's specific for where you work. And if you don't work somewhere, it's fine. We come up with like a fictional place. But the idea is that, so like most places that I consult with, because I do like a lot of consulting calls where companies are like, so we're doing this and we know it's not working, like what can we do? And so I took all of that information of solving so many problems for like years and just so many best practices. So for instance, we're doing DevSecOps, and we want to put 20 tools in the pipeline. I'm like, here's all these reasons why you're going to make all the devs really sad, and then they're going to turn it off behind your back. And so here's what you can put in the pipeline, and here's maybe what we should put outside the pipeline. And then here's what we can put in the pipeline just sometimes, right? And so I feel like there wasn't a place where I could go where someone would just explain really simply what threat modeling is and then how to start doing it. I find like there's so many amazing experts that talk about threat modeling in these super in-depth, like this thick textbook books. But I'm like, couldn't you just tell me it's like we sit around with a dev and a business person, and then we have like an evil brainstorm about like what could happen. And then like we make a list of everything that sounds scary and plausible, and then like we make sure that can't happen, right? Like, and isn't that like an easy way to say it? And then it's like, here's how we could start doing it. So let's go do it.
I do want to point out that there's a significant number of like free pieces of content and courses on the website as well, which both the book and the website will be linked in the description of the podcast for anybody who wants to check it out.
Yeah. So actually, so on that note, we're giving away some free email courses, but the trick is we make you join our newsletter, which is free.
I think I said it before. That's asking for too much. I'm sorry. It just is.
It is. And because there will be dad jokes and memes that we made or stole off of Twitter.
I think I'm changing my mind. You're
balance it
selling
out,
me
like
on
having
this.
to sign up for newsletters. So I
Yeah.
think we're coming out pretty good here now.
Yeah, that's the kind of newsletter I want to be part of. I'm sold. I've changed my mind.
So I sent out like a newsletter today, and I don't know if you know, but Flash, like Adobe Flash, is finally no longer supported, and like,
Yep.
and so like it's this picture
Hallelujah.
of this guy in front of a grave, and on the like tombstone it says Flash, and then the guy's like, yeah, and then it points to him, and it's like every IT security person on the planet. I'm like, have a great weekend, folks.
I mean, that's like
Oh, that's
like
classic.
sea shanty TikTok for InfoSec people right there.
I remember when I was long before I got into leadership, I was an incident response consultant, and one of the things that we would always do in a report is we would go out, we would find out exactly how many Flash vulnerabilities you had based on insecure versions of Flash. On every single like threat hunting engagement I did, we would look into this stuff, and it was always way more than what normal people would expect, right? Because you don't think about that stuff when you're in that position. It's
Yeah.
always more.
Yeah, and I did pen testing for a while before I moved to web apps, or sorry, to AppSec, and I found like I could find some things with a scanner, but I found just like I would just talk up the dev and be like, if you were going to hack your app, how would you do it? Oh, so there's an admin module no one told me about? Oh, great, I want to see that. Thanks, man.
Exactly.
And like I'm trying to help them, right? And if they don't tell me the whole thing, yeah, and just like a little bit of talking, you can
Yep.
get a lot further.
It's like when you need intelligence on a specific building and organization, go make friends with the security guards and the janitorial staff.
It's a people business. Like this is very much a people business, no matter what way you cut it.
Oh yeah.
And I always look at it this way: an error message is a window to an application's soul.
Yes, an uncaught error message,
Yes.
right? Like stack trace, thank you very much. SQL
Yes.
server errors, yes, please.
Yes. Show me love. Give me the meat and the veggies.
So talking about like mentioning that, like I don't know. Well, my experience with like application security logs with those error messages, you know, if you're in an organization that manages to send them to the log aggregator SIM tool for the analyst to look at, there's usually little to no documentation as to what the error messages mean, and so you get something like successfully failed as an error message.
Whoa.
How true is that across like just general AppSec? Just these confusing, sometimes seeming like old school alchemy style logs.
I would say that a lot of custom apps that do log, no one's reading those logs. They're not saving them. They're certainly not protecting them. And the things they're logging are either violating GDPR or are completely useless. Not all of them, but lots of them. Like they'll be like failed login attempt, and then there'll be 400 failed login attempts, and it's like, so is this 400 different users? Is this the same user? Is it 400 different users from the same IP?
Or is it
Right?
just 400
Better
logs
yet.
of the same user for the same login attempt, just different aspects of the application triggering at the same time?
How many custom apps, in your experience, are really thinking about logging standards or what to log, or even bothering to build baseline logging into them?
So I would say that if you work at a place like Microsoft where they like lead the way, oh yeah, like their stuff is top
Sure.
notch. But I would say that places that aren't a household name, most of them it's like a giant mess. Like there's no logs, or the logs are just things that one dev understand. Like, hey, Linus, look over on code. Look in this function. There's probably problems, yo. And like that's the actual message.
Oh, but wait, that dev just left last week to go to a different company.
I worked somewhere once, and I came in to like lead their custom apps teams, and so there were 3 custom app teams, but the other 2 guys had been hired during Y2K, and so so one of them I don't know what his experience was, but he didn't know anything. And the other guy, his previous job was personal trainer. And their apps basically, so I come and they're like, all of our apps log Tanya. I'm like, great, where do they go? And they're like on some random server somewhere, all in the same place. I'm like, great, so who's monitoring them? They're like, all of us are. And I'm like, oh, how's that work? And they're like, we send an email every day that says, and the email says, I'm up for each app to every single person on the team. So guess what happened? Immediately, so we would get 75 of them every morning. And so do you count that there's exactly 75? No, you don't. So our apps would go down all the time. We'd never know. We wouldn't know why. And everyone just made a rule that went into a folder.
Filter
so no one was
to folder
checking.
mark red.
Yeah, I was like, why not instead let's make like a little service that like just goes and like just sees if each one loads once per hour and then like sends an email to everyone. If it fails, they're like, that's too much work, Tanya. And so then like clients kept calling like, your app's been down for like 2 days. Like, could you do something? And I'm like, I don't want the client to tell us. I want to know before. And so slowly I started changing things and like modernizing some stuff. But that was one of the first places I worked that even had any logging. Yeah, like lots of custom apps with no logs. And so then eventually I started coming up with, I want exactly this to be logged. Do not log these things. So for instance, like I want to know the IP address if you've got it. I want to know the username if you've got it. I do not want their password, even if they got it wrong, because it's probably one character off. And so you're basically giving me their password, right?
Yeah, that's all I'm laughing.
Yep.
Like,
I would love to additionally pick your brain because we had a director of a ProdSec department, the one where I work, come on a little while ago.
Oh,
I'd love to
cool.
pick your brain on thoughts on like bug bounty and how
Yeah.
bug bounty fits into this stuff.
So bug bounties are interesting because, so it's sort of a gig economy. So that's a bit weird. So you end up having, so have you read the book Freakonomics and how it talks about how drug dealers get paid on average $4 per hour? And like the way that they do this is by having like the main drug dealer have so much bling and like lots of fancy girlfriends and like just look so powerful and so rich that then everyone is like willing to work at the bottom to try to get up to the top. And then you have people like risking their life and risking jail and all these other things, and they're averaging almost nothing just so that, because they want that lifestyle. And so when you look at bug bounty hunters, so I've had 2 on my podcast so far, and I asked them about it, and they're just like, it's a hobby I do for fun. It's extra income when I hit, but I have a full-time job. And so sometimes they like advertise it like it could be a full-time job, and people will say like, oh, I did like 5 minutes of work and I made $200,000. And I'm like, no, that's
I mean,
not
it seems
true.
like every one
Yeah.
of the modern platforms are like, you can come make your money here. They release
Yeah.
their stats. There's like maybe 7 or 8 people who can live off of bug bounty who are
Yeah.
that good, and the
Right.
rest of the people you really can't.
Yeah, and you also end up so like one of the main reasons why you would really want to hire a firm is for them to do triage, because you'll receive the same report like 47,000 times for the exact same thing, and you're like, yo, that's not even on like in our scope. I have definitely talked with lots of people that run bug bounties where, I kid you not, they'll take over the accounts of customers and be like, yo, I did account takeover. And they'll be like, pay me my money and I'll give it back to you. And we're like, you are extorting our customers.
Yeah, that's
How can you-
extortion, not in scope bug bounty right there.
That's not bounty. You've crossed the bounty line. You
Yeah,
really have.
like it's out of scope, but also
Yeah.
you are currently ransoming
Yeah.
my customer to me.
Yes.
And like, so I don't know how you think you're adding value. So that is actually really common. Like surprise, like me writing hackers being like, okay, so like we're not going to pay you for that. Like, well, you have to, or I'm not going to let it go. I'm like, so what you've done is illegal and you told us about it. So we're going to give you a grace period to let it go. And then we're going to call the cops. And they're like, what?
Guess what?
Tanya's mean.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a couple things. I'm glad you brought up Freakonomics. When I read that, it kind of dinged on a couple things in my past. Like one, when I was much younger, got sucked into multi-level marketing. And that book really kind of said how drug dealing is like the perfected model of multi-level
Yeah.
marketing.
There's
Yeah.
There's a training company I won't name that does that too with their trainers, where you have to start at a very, 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 very low pay, and you have to keep working at this very, very, like
low pay.
like you could work at a grocery store and make more, but yet you're teaching InfoSec, but eventually you're going to be at the top. Like
You'll
this
get the
guy.
silver, platinum, gold package. and
You'll
then
get to be a
you'll
rock star. Everyone will recognize your name.
Yep.
I remember them telling me, they're like, "Well, we'll let you go to job level 2," and I'm like, I'm awesome now.
Yeah,
I mean, doesn't Scientology also do something similar where you can just basically buy your way into the higher levels?
Yeah.
Oh,
That was my my
know
ultimate
that.
platinum gold package thing. I'm not gonna say that I didn't pull a little bit of Scientology in for that joke.
So,
oh man.
so the second thing you mentioned was you had a podcast. I mean, you're on ours. Why don't you go ahead and like pitch yours there a little
Yeah.
Yes.
So, like, almost exactly a year ago, I wrote a blog post called Jobs and Information Security, and it got 40,000 reads in the first few days. And usually my blog posts get like 2,000-3,000 the first week, and then it like just peters off and disappears, which is fine. And I was like, whoa, I've really hit a nerve. And just person after person wrote me, and they're like, I've never understood what all the different jobs meant. And when I joined InfoSec, I became a pen tester because that's what my professional mentor did. And the guy that ran the OWASP chapter, Sharif Kusa, in the city that I lived in, he was a pen tester too. And he like taught me about pen testing, and like all these awesome humans were teaching me about pen testing. I didn't even know AppSec was a job. I didn't know instant response was a job, and that I would basically be addicted to like managing an AppSec incident and like taking care of my devs. And like, I didn't know that like this was a thing that you could do. And so it turned out like there's tons of different jobs, like what are forensics, and like how do you handle chain of custody, and like what does that mean, and like what do you have to prepare yourself for in doing those. So I just described what all the different jobs were because people were always asking me, so that I could send them to the job post. It still gets hundreds of reads per week a year later. So I was talking to someone and I was like, you know how I'm always like way too busy? I really want to start a podcast. And they're like, you do not have time for this. I'm like, but here's the thing about starting a podcast that like people don't tell you, is that then you basically get to invite people that you think are super cool, that you've always wanted to meet on your show, and then lots of them say yes, and you get to hang out with them for free.
That's the trick. Like, that's what we have learned.
Right? And,
Yeah.
and so I was like, I want to start a podcast that like helps a lot of people. And I was like, I could start a podcast that's like how to do AppSec. But I'm like, that's what my book and my courses and all the other stuff is. And I'm like, what I'd really like to do is interview people that have really super cool and very different jobs in InfoSec, and then ask, so how'd you get that job? Like, what type of experience did you need? What type of training could you take? Like, what personality traits do you need? So for instance, for pen testing, like you need some personality traits like patience. There is so much patience. And also, like in my case, like, so my first pen testing boss was like very sexist. And so I went in one day where I didn't have a test planned, and then he sent me on a test and I was wearing a dress. And I don't know if you know what it's like in a data center, but all the cold air comes up from the bottom. My legs after 8 hours were completely numb. I was like in agony. It was so awful. And he's like, oh, do you want to leave? Because he wanted to prove that as a woman, I couldn't do it right. I'm like, I'm fine. I was like turning blue. I'm like, I don't care, asshole.
I'm gonna do this.
I'm going to do this.
Yes.
I love the what you do with the podcast. We do a thing called the Job Series with guests, where we try to bring in people from different jobs to talk about how they got there. You have like a much more consistent version of that, and it's incredible.
Oh, thank you.
So everybody should check that out, because it's going to teach you a lot about like different kinds of jobs and different things that you could do. And there's so much in this industry.
And what it
what's
will
that called?
be
And what's that
like.
called for our listeners? Like, what's the name
We
of the
Hack
podcast?
Purple Podcast. So just look up We Hack Purple Podcast, and it's on every single platform that I could get it onto. And then we also live stream it on YouTube. So if you want to join us and ask our guests questions, you can. And sometimes those are the best parts. Like someone will come on that's like really, really considering a job change and ask like the most thoughtful questions. But like, I think a thing that is really important is that people get to know what it's like to do that job, and like what your favorite parts are,
Absolutely.
what your least favorite parts are. And like as a pen tester, I found like a thing that I don't know how to explain it, but like that kind of like really, really irked me was that then I had to leave. And I was like, no, I need to help them fix this. Like, there's still outstanding problems. Because I am a dev in my heart. And I was like, I can't just walk away from bugs. I am a bug slayer. I have to help them. And like my boss was like, no, you have to go now. And I found it really hard to say goodbye. And so then I found out like AppSec is like, you can just keep helping them. And so then I started consulting, and I would sell a pen test, and then I would just do AppSec to them. I would be like, yeah, I need 14 days instead of 10 like everyone else. I guess I'm really slow. Let's threat model this. Can I whiteboard this with you? I sent you some security requirements that I want you to review. And they're just like, this is the weirdest pen test we've ever done. She showed up 3 months before we went live. I'm like, yeah.
I often wonder, we've always had the joke of like hashtag make blue team sexy around here. And one of the things that I've always felt that kind of kept Blue Team back was that we didn't have people out there a lot talking about the things that they did and how different those things are. You know, the community, so to speak, like what you can find has for a long time up until probably the last few years has been pretty heavily dominated by the offensive side of the industry.
Yeah.
And we're starting to come into it now, and I think more and more people are starting to see the options that exist on the defensive side.
Yep.
Well, and like, so I did pen testing, and honestly, like when you find a really cool, amazing bug, I do a happy dance, and I'm not going to pretend I don't. But like, I found pen testing like a bit lonely because I am a social butterfly. I did like the Myers-Briggs test, and I got 100% extrovert, and I was just like, and so with AppSec, I'm always talking to a dev. I'm always like teaching or presenting a thing, and so like I still get to smash. But like first of all, like I don't have to shatter the applications, so I can hire like a third party to come in who like super specializes in like obliterating Kubernetes, but I can know like all the basics of securing that and like know all the basic checks and make sure by the time that person comes in, like they have to work their buns off to find good stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And so like, and I really love seeing like the progress of a program and seeing like the entire security posture come up. Like that's a thing that I guess I did not know at first, but like really gives me so much job satisfaction.
I love building programs. Like it's one of my favorite things to do in the world is solve complex problems and figure out how to make a bunch of pieces fit together.
And then watching the individuals in that program as it progresses feel more confident in themselves and in their job.
Right?
Yes.
It's amazing.
Oh my gosh. I had a dev. So like years ago, I was building this AppSec program at this place and they wanted me to do developer education. I was super excited. And I was just starting to do talks and trainings then, and it was new for me. And so I made this deep dive into cross-site scripting. So I'm like, we have cross-site scripting like in every, they're like, where is it? I'm like, in every field of every app. It's like we're trying to do it.
Yeah.
And so this guy came up to me after and he's like, you know, I'm the dev lead for this team and like, we don't have any. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And I was like, can I look? And he's like, no, I'm going to do those tests that you said. So I've got the OWASP cheat sheet for the filter evasions and I'm going to do the thing you said. And I was like, great. So a week later, I'm in the cafeteria and he's like, hey, Tanya. And I'm like, oh gosh, he recognizes me. This is awesome. A dev's talking to me on purpose during his off time. Awesome. And he's like, yeah, I went back to my desk and I did one of our apps and I found some. And I was like, oh, and he's like, you know what? And then I found another one. And then we're supposed to have a team meeting. I'm like, everyone come in here. I'm like, there's this new chick, Tanya. She said this. And then he showed them and he was like, I had your slides because you sent that email. And I was like, let's check all our apps. So all my devs and I spent like the afternoon kind of crawling over our apps and we documented all of our apps in all the places. And he's like, and next week is cross-site scripting week. And we are going to obliterate it. And then you come a knock-in because we got you. And he's like, I can't wait for the next of the OWASP top 10 so I can show you. And I was like, oh my God, this is the best discussion I've ever had at work. Like,
So,
right?
even outside the work stuff, I do want to talk about one thing because, you know, I didn't know of you from all this stuff. I knew of you because I think you have affected probably hundreds, if not thousands of people through Mentor Mondays and all the mentoring work that you do and putting people together. And like, not only is that stuff fantastic and, you know, it's how I heard about you in the first place. And I love that you do it, but like what spawned that? Like, I would guess that you're kind of just naturally like a teacher, and I can hear as you talk about it, you're so freaking excited when you talk about like teaching and affecting people. But
I started being one of the chapter leaders for OWASP. And for the chapter in my city. And I said, so the way I started learning was getting a professional mentor. And, everyone should just get one. And so people started asking me to be their mentor. And then I was like, well, I'm mentoring like 4 people. And like, I don't know very much yet because I'm brand new. And I was like, I want to get people more mentors. So then we started a mentoring program. And it was really awesome because 10 people showed up to be mentors and we paired them with people. But then it turned out like us choosing the pairing really didn't go well because you have to find a person like you really click with. So then I tried doing kind of some mentoring via like the bigger OWASP, like the foundation. And then again, like the pairings didn't work that well. So then one day I just did a tweet and then a post on LinkedIn and it said, do you need a professional mentor? Post here what you're looking for. And then if you want to give back, please give back and say yes to someone and make their year. And there were something like 750 people on the first post. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I was like, maybe I'll do one again in a month. And so then I started doing it every Monday. And it got so big, the Mentoring Monday hashtag, that lots of people started using it. So I made it. And then, some universities started using it. This women's group started using it. And then an advertising marketing group got a hold of it and started drowning us with hundreds of automated tweets per week. Yeah, so I did what I always do. I held a Twitter poll and I was like, yo, we need to rename so we can make it ours. And so we added cyber. So it's now Cyber Mentoring Mondays. Every single Monday I tweet out, but now it's not just me. So there's this awesome person named Frank. There's a woman named Diane. There's, oh my gosh, I'm like seeing all of their faces in Twitter, their little Twitter pictures in my head. And so some people, they just do it once a month. And some of them, they do it every Monday. And some of them like just come in and out. Or sometimes people just come one week. They meet so many people and they just like work with those people for a year before they come back. And I have had countless people come up to me at conferences. This man came up to me and he's like, I would like to buy you a coffee. I'm like, coffee's free. He's like, I would like to drink a coffee in your presence. I'm like, awesome, let's do it. and he told me, so he's like, it's impossible to hire AppSec engineers. And this young lady who just graduated computer science, she really wanted to work in AppSec. So I started mentoring her. And then after 6 or 7 months, I told my boss, like, she's like really awesome. Like, could we hire a junior AppSec person? Like, I basically, every time I give her something, she runs off and just like does the crap out of it. She does such a good job. She's so amazing. She's so hungry for knowledge. And he's like, so she's been working for me for 6 months. And my boss is like, she's the best hire we've had since you. Like, she's outstanding. He's like, I never, ever would have met her. And she's like, so happy. And then so he worked for a fancy stereo company, and then he gave me a discount on their fancy stereos as a present, which was really awesome because I love music. He's like, do you want 15% off? And I was like, oh my gosh, is this conversation for real? Yes.
I know I have met so many people and gotten a chance to like talk to and try to help teach so many people through your Mentoring Monday stuff. And through your threads, like I've found long-term mentors, I have found short-term, like, let me just help you answer a couple questions. But it's been awesome for me because it gives me a lot of reach where I wouldn't have thought that I had it before, where I can help out a lot of people, which is really cool.
Yeah, sometimes just answering like such a simple question. So for instance, at first, every single person asked to be a pen tester. Every single one. And so that's why I wrote the jobs and information security one. And so whenever people say, I want to work in InfoSec, but I don't know what to do, I send them that link. So I actually send like a lot of those people links to so most of Mentoring Monday, Cyber Mentoring Monday is like an iceberg and it's all in private messages. And so when you see, 20 comments, there's hundreds of messages going back and forth between people. So someone will post something. And sometimes I'll check in with them and say, did anyone answer you? And they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm talking to 3 people and trying to figure out which one's like the best fit for both of us. But sometimes people don't get answered. And I say, okay, well, I'll retweet you every single week till we find you someone. I don't care. Tweets are free. Let's do this. And yeah, I've been able to find so many people good matches, and I don't match you. You match yourself with someone that is good for you, because I have learned of all this, I've learned that I am now a matchmaker. I'm a connector.
I mean,
and that's okay.
well, you hit the E on the Myers-Briggs, so matchmaker totally fits in. Speaking as another E, just.
Yeah.
So we've got Mentoring Monday. We've got a pretty good background. Now, time to kind of put that into a little bit of practical experience, like on the spot on the podcast tonight.
Okay.
So
let's do it.
we're called detections because we like to provide some sort of application of a detection to our listeners on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
For our guests, we put them on the hot seat for the week. So, yeah, what do you got for us?
Okay, so I want everyone that writes custom apps to catch every error and handle it. And I want them to send alerts to the sim if something looks shady. Seriously. So if you're writing a custom app, first of all, you should, like Charles was saying, you should never, ever, ever have like a stack trace or like an SQL Server error on the screen. So that is instructions for Charles and I to own you. That's what it is. It helps us when we are and we're nice people. We are nice red teamers, but it helps malicious actors too. So you need to catch everything. But then on top of that, some things look shady. You know, oh, this person tried to log in 10 times in under 5 seconds. That's not a person. That's a bot. And you want to issue an alert, and you want to issue the alert to the SIM. So go talk to the security team and say, I have a custom app and I'm logging stuff. And sometimes stuff is shady and I want to send it to you. How do I do that? What format do you need it in? Make sure you do these things. So log the IP address if you've got it. Log the username if you've got it. Log the timestamp if you've got it. Log what the heck was happening and the outcome. And if something shady happens and there's an error, always roll back. I don't care what happened. I don't care if you're 3/4 way through your transaction, always roll back. Never fail into like an I don't know what I'm doing. Don't ever let it just, oh, I'm sure it's fine. No, there's an error. You roll back, let them do it again. They can press submit again. They'll be fine. But you don't want to have a situation where someone's paid for a coffee, they get to Starbucks, their coffee's not there, right? And then like no orders happened and you paid for thin air, right? And so always, if something's shady, send it to the SIM. So the people in there, the SOC, the Security Operations Center, they're just dying to hear from you, right? I see the smile.
We really are.
Yeah.
Honestly, we really are. Like, I love talking to people in my organization who create applications and talking to them about what it is that they think is shady.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes they're going to have far more context into that than I have into that.
So as an analyst working with SOCs, if someone like that came to me and said, how do you want to receive this? Like
the format.
Instant smile, instant bright light. Like, you're asking me how we want to receive this information. That's just makes the day.
Well, and devs can do that. Like, devs can make anything out of nothing, right? So if you say, like, oh, I want a timestamp and I want the timestamp in this format, like, that's easy. It's when you say, just send me the stuff and it's ambiguous and the dev doesn't know it. For me, when I was a dev, that's the hardest. I'm like, I can't read your mind. Tell me exactly what you want and I will make that a reality. But if you say, oh, just send whatever you want, it's going to be ridiculous.
It's
Right.
going to
don't
be
know what you
successfully
want.
failed error
Right.
messages.
So now that we've hit that, Tanya, anything that we didn't cover tonight that you want to cover before we wrap up?
I want to ask people to join my company's newsletter. So you just go to newsletter.wehackpurple.com because we made these. So we do like paid courses, but we made a bunch of like free mini courses that we're giving away on email. And I have like marketing people that work for me now. And I'm like no longer the boss of this stuff. I'm like, can't I just put it on social media? And they're like, no, you have to join our newsletter. And I was like, why? And they're like, because so that people will be on our newsletter. There's no, if you just put every single thing onto social media, there's no reason they need to be on the newsletter. I'm like, but for convenience, because then it's in their inbox. So like, that's not how it works, Tanya. Just keep making awesome content and we'll market it. And I was like, okay. And so we're giving away like a chunk of a bunch of different courses and making them into a mini course. And specifically like incident response for custom apps. Like, what the heck is it? I'm a dev. What is incident response? What do I need to know? Please don't go home partway through an incident that I am managing where you are the only person that knows where the code is. Oh my gosh.
And
Please
you
don't.
can win that by signing up for the newsletter.
Yeah.
There you go.
You can win it / receive the invite.
And I know we didn't talk. So the kind of the third tier is the community,
Yeah.
which is your own She Hacks Purple community or We Hack Purple
Yeah.
community, which is another option for people who want to get involved and have these conversations with a bunch of other people as well.
Yeah, so I started that last February and we have around 200 people in it. And then I closed it and I was migrating us to a new platform. But it turns out the new platform, salespeople are full of it and it doesn't do any of the stuff they said. So we've decided yesterday to break up with them. So we ported 250 videos and blog posts and everything in there, and then the hundreds of people. And then we're just like, it doesn't work right. It's super janky. So we're going to move somewhere else. So like it's closed right now. I'm sorry, but it's going to be open in the next couple of weeks because it's basically my number one priority because I want to hang out with them. And so we do stuff like, in December and November, we did lots of streams together where we built stuff with GitHub Actions, and then I always broke it on everyone because that's how I am. And then like I make a video of how I did it, and then like I share the links so everyone can copy my code, and we'll just like build stuff together, or break stuff together, or have like a big discussion. So like we've had a big discussion last week about, why do AppSec jobs ask for the OSCP certification? It has nothing to do with AppSec. And I'm like, because there's no good AppSec cert. And they're like, you have an AppSec cert. I'm like, yeah, but we've only had 2 grads so far. And also it's like a certificate of completion that you know how to run a program. It's not like the OSCP where it's like 24 hours of hell. From what I'm told, I haven't done it, but it sounds,
I've experienced it. Trust me.
it sounds,
Yeah,
it sounds awful. I mean, like, don't
yeah,
get
it
me
was
like,
18 hours for me.
I like really like naps and like food and not staying up.
Me too.
I like sleep.
Seeing the trees outside.
Right?
So
But once
BSD,
you accomplish it,
go ahead.
it's like, like,
do you feel
literally.
that you use the stuff in your job?
yes.
Okay.
I'll tell you this, like with OSCP, it gives you a foundation
Okay.
from where to start because it touches on not only like net pen testing but also web app and
Oh,
how
yeah.
to approach attacking a web app and buffer overflow. So it kind of covers different aspects, and then from there you can kind of branch off to where you want to go.
Okay.
I do a lot of net pen testing, but I have a huge interest in and we talk about this all the time, like putting things in the browser that can kind of maybe trip up threat hunters.
I mean,
or
that's
just
the
kind
new
of,
attack surface right there.
Yeah, that
Limited
is- that's the-
visibility and everybody's in it.
yes.
Yeah.
And so on Tuesday I'm actually doing a talk on how to approach hacking web APIs.
Nice.
Yes, I'll definitely tweet out the recording as
Okay,
well,
yeah.
so everybody can take a look at it too. So, and it's just more so because there's not a lot of information on attacking web APIs. It's
Yeah.
more so, hey, here's this fuzzer, run it against the API and see
Right.
what you get back.
Yeah.
And you can approach it like it's similar to like attacking web apps, but there's specific things that make it different. So that's what I'm going to be talking about on
nice.
Tuesday. And I have a blog post coming out. I'm been on a roll with I'm trying to do like
We're supposed to be
This
we're,
is the
we're
year
supposed
of
to
the
be
web.
pitching Tanya today, BSD.
Yeah,
no,
so
keep-
I was actually just gonna say
I don't know. Once
we
you started
made it
web,
all the
I'm
way
sorry.
till the
I'm so sorry.
we made it all the way
turned
to
it
the
web.
end before the Tanya the podcast host started interviewing us.
Forgive me.
Ray did
once
it
you
like
sta-
5 times.
I got so
Hey,
excited.
hey, BSD, I have to.
Yes. Yes, I earned that one.
So,
When we start talking about web, I go on a tangent.
Oh, I know.
That's it.
but it's good. It's good.
Yeah.
It is good.
So, Exile, closing thoughts.
Yes.
Man, I had fun. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate having more West Coast representation. Often it comes from like Midwest or East Coast when we hear all this stuff because of how much like DC and North Virginia is a center for this. But
And because the East Coast is awesome.
West Coast, best coast. I mean, we just know that.
Only the East Coast is better.
Dude, I am super excited for our listeners to get on your newsletter, get in on the training. There's some that I'm interested in already to increase the knowledge set that I have, because there is a lot of custom apps out there, like you said, and understanding how to deal with just the logs as they're generated, or even to help the developers from a detection response standpoint to generate their logs to help us. Like, I'm going to help you, help me, help you.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
If you follow at WeHackPurple on Twitter, we're actually going to tweet out. So I made these PDFs about like how to do, and then it's just like a cheat sheet on how to do things. And one of them is like logging and error monitoring, and it's like 3 pages because I couldn't help myself. Like it's like 2 pages of like why logging is important, and one like what to log, and then one do not log this.
That's me when I write too. It's like I write and then I'm like, oh crap, I gotta chop off like 3/4 of this just because it's so verbose.
I added pictures.
Pictures are great. They keep my attention span. BSD, closing thoughts?
Oh my God. I just want to say it's been a pleasure. And I'm, like I said, I'm a huge fan. I really enjoy your work. And please don't ever stop this. Keep it going, because this helps so many people.
Thank you.
And Tanya, closing thoughts, and this is a chance to just dump all the places that people can find you.
Oh, yeah. So go to wehackpurple.com, and that's my company. And we have training, and the community will be open there in the next 3 weeks, come hell or high water. And you can follow me on Twitter at SheHacksPurple. So basically every platform, there's SheHacksPurple, and that's just me. And then WeHackPurple is my company. And apparently we have an Instagram and a Facebook account. I don't like Facebook, but we have one now. And someone else that's on the marketing team, I hired 2 students, and they are like doing all the cool kid stuff. And so we have those things. And there are a lot of next generation Star Trek memes. And also like, especially like Klingons being really excited about security headers. So if you're down for that type of silliness, I will definitely teach you security in all the places. Thank you. Thank you for having me so much. This was so fun.
Oh, absolutely. And I will just end with thank you so much for coming on. This was an absolute blast. I'm so glad that you hit us up to come on. I swear we would have got to you because we would have reached out eventually. But I'm so glad you reached out, so we fast-tracked that.
Yep.
It was such a fun conversation.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Laughter happened all around. These are the best ones. I'm so glad that you're doing something that you love, and so glad that you're so excited about it. Like, it shows like how excited you are about what you do. And it's like when I interview people, like when I leave an interview, like I look for like, and I mean like for jobs, I look for like, do I leave that feeling excited? And like, I know I feel good about that candidate, and I'm leaving this podcast feeling excited, which is really cool to me. Like, it's my favorite.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been a super blast.
Everybody, thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to go forth and find badness.
Yes.